So obviously there's an impact, right? So the science has loads of stages. The first thing we do is we make devices, and we make devices in the clean room. So the clean room is shut, so there are no new devices. We also have collaborators, so there's some collaborators in Cambridge who also make our devices, and their clean room is also shut, so no new devices for a while. That's a bit of a problem, but often once you make a device, and you've got a good one, you measure it for a really long time. And so we were in a fortunate position where we actually had devices, and we've got, you know, if you really wanted to, you could continue to measure these devices for years and years and years, and you'd still be getting interesting science out of them. So it's just a question of, at some point you have to say no, enough, and then stop measuring them. But we've had devices in our dilution fridge for the whole of lockdown, and we've built our measurement setup in such a way that we can interface with it through a control computer, and we can remote into the control computer. So we've actually been able to run a lot of experiments completely remotely, and have been running experiments throughout the whole of lockdown, have got some really exciting science done. So that's really kind of cool, in terms of, a lot of people have been locked out of our labs, but we've been able to just sit here at home, remoting into a PC and running some science, which is cool. Whereas if you're running things programmatically, so we use Python, which is a scripting language to control all of the computer, which runs on our computer and controls all of our equipment. It means you can just queue up experiments and you say, do this experiment, then do this experiment, then do this experiment, and you're automatically taking your data onto your computer. You can in tandem run analysis code, and it means that you can very quickly understand what's happening in your experiment. I think it's a really good way to do it. And we were already doing it, and then lockdown just made it really valuable to us. Yeah, well, you know, we've been a little bit smug, but no, I think like not all experiments can run like that, right? So when we're thinking about the clean room part of it, there's no way we could run that. Like often there's experiments where you need to have someone there. So not all experiment, and then sometimes you need to change through samples, and if you want to change samples, then you need to have a human in the lab. If you want to change your setup, you need a human in the lab. But the type of experiment that we're doing at the moment means that we can actually leave the system relatively unattended for quite a long time. Having said that, I've been going in throughout lockdown. So I've been one of the LCN kind of people who's allowed to go in and just do like simple maintenance tasks just to make sure that the equipment stays running. So there's a little bit of hands-on time. So we have a meeting, we have a daily meeting now, which we didn't, I mean, we were all in the lab, right? So you would either be in the lab or you'd be at your desk and you'd have a cup of tea and you'd have a chat and then go to the whiteboard. And when we went into lockdown, we realized that that was not going to be the case. And we thought that it'd be good just to make sure that we're all meeting up every day, just so that there's like, if we're discussing the science, everyone can input to it, everyone can understand what's happening. So we thought that would be really important, and have continued to do that pretty much every day. We meet every so often. The meeting doesn't happen because everyone's busy, but like pretty much every day we meet and just have a chat. So it's varied a little bit. As I said, that I was one of the people going into the lab. So there's maybe two types of lockdown day. There's a lab day and a non-lab day. And I was probably going into the lab 1 or 2 days a week. So on a non-lab day, I would wake up, I would go and sit in front of my computer, and then many hours later, I would no longer be sitting in front of my computer. And that is what my day would be. Hopefully, you know, you've managed to have some lunch outside with your housemates, and like, when you're on your computer, obviously you're doing different things. There's emails, there's remoting into your PC, there's analysis. We've been writing papers, have just put some up on the archive. I'm applying for some new fellowship positions. So there's lots of different things you're doing on your computer, but it's essentially, you know, just sitting here. If I'm going to the lab, I get on my bike and I cycle down, trying to beat all the red lights, and then get to the lab. And then there's typically like some just routine lab maintenance. So the dilution fridges we use have liquid nitrogen traps. And so basically you run a gas through a bit of charcoal, which is cooled to low temperatures, and then any impurities just get sucked out onto the charcoal, like activated charcoal where people use it, you know, to cure poisons and stuff. It's the same kind of idea. It's got a big surface area. And so stuff sits on there, and you need to continually top it up with liquid nitrogen. So that needs to happen every week or so. I've been doing that. Then there's also, lots of us have been running experiments remotely. And so it's like, oh, Oscar, whilst you're in, could you please, you know, like flick this switch, turn this cable onto this port, and just doing the stuff that everyone needed just to keep the experiments running, or changing experimental setup. So a little bit, you kind of go into UCL, and then like sometimes you walk into the quad and there's just sort of like a fox chilling out because no one's there, and then you go out through the back of physics to fill up the nitrogen, and there's like cockroaches that are about a mile long and they're just revolting. So a little bit zombie vibes, but mostly it was just, you know, like a normal day in the lab, no one else is there. It's quite nice to be in the lab with no one else there because you can just do your thing. Obviously it's nice to have other people there, but there's like a special treat when you're in the lab on your own, you can just get stuff done. Okay, so you're now looking at yourself. So I built a desk. When lockdown started, I was worried that I was going to be sitting on this. So I went to a timber merchant, got this board and built a desk from it. And then one of my friends was moving offices and I managed to nab an office chair, which has been wicked. And then there's obviously my unmade bed in the background, which is nice. And yeah, so it's, my computer doesn't really move very well. I bought a bike and it's wicked. I spent a long time being like, oh, I'm not a good enough cyclist to cycle in London, it'd be so scary. And then I was like, well, I'm never going to be able to get the tube ever again, so I'm going to have to cycle everywhere. And I bought a bike and that was wicked. I think a slightly slower pace of life was quite nice. So like, obviously I'm now really excited to be able to go to a park and see some friends, but in lockdown, there was some nice stuff of like, oh, actually, rather than I've got 5 plans on 5 nights, it's like, I've got no plans all week, and so I can just make some dinner. And that was quite nice.